AMD's fluid motion frames. Can this fix your Star Citizen performance woes? Well, only if you've got a 7000 series for a start. So this is a 7000 series GPU is needed to get this technology. It's on a preview driver. AMD released this over the weekend, and basically I thought I just need to test this. So I ordered a 7600. I've got it. I've tested it, and this is interesting because on one hand, this does improve your frame rate, but there are a number of issues with it, which we'll get to. So what is this technology? Now, it's not the same as FSR3, which is AMD's equivalent of DLSS 3. This whole idea that NVIDIA came up with where they insert extra frames to get you a smoother frame rate. Now, FSR3 is that same technology. It's kind of this combined thing of upscaling and frame generation, but this is just the frame generation side of it, and it is just driver level. So effectively, you've got one frame, you've got the next frame, and this technology is adding in a middle frame. That's the basic way, and it does that in the same way that some TVs will add frames to smooth out the picture. It's a similar sort of thing to that. This YouTube video is at 60 frames per second, so that makes this whole thing quite hard for you to tell. So I've slowed some stuff down, which kind of gives you an idea of how it works, but you're gonna just have to trust me on some of this. So first of all, can you tell which one here has got fluid motion frames on or off? Got the left and the right. This is on my minimum spec system, and like I say, it's actually quite hard to tell. But if we slow it down to 50% speed, you will be able to see, I think, the difference. On the left, it is off, and it's noticeably more juddery, I think, than with fluid motion on. Now, here are the numbers on the screen, so you'll be able to see what's going on, and you'll see that in general, we're not exactly doubling, but we are around the doubling mark. Now, this is impressive for Star Citizen because up until this point, there's not really been anything you can do when you are CPU bound. So in this scene, running around Lawville with my minimum spec system here with a 10400 in it, that is the issue. The CPU is the issue. And you can improve your GPU as much as you like, you can lower the resolution as much as you like, but it's not going to make any difference because you are CPU bound. But this technology can get past that. It can double your frame rate, even if you are CPU bound. So on one hand, it is magic, but as we'll get onto, it doesn't quite work as well as that. Just to show you, I did some testing. I did a load of runs as usual in Lawville, and these are the numbers for fluid motion on and off, and you'll see that basically they're the same. Now, CapFrameX, the program I use, can't pick up the added frames, so we're seeing the same numbers. But the point of this testing is to show you that it doesn't hinder performance in any way by turning this on. It doesn't do anything to the 1% lows. Basically, they are exactly the same. So in some ways, it's free performance it doesn't affect your performance negatively in any way to have this on. But watch this section, and especially keep an eye on the right with the motion frames on. There are points where Star Citizen stutters. That we all experience that. There's no way to get around it. You can spend all the money in the world and you're still going to get stuttery performance. If you look at the right, you'll notice moments where those stutters happen and you get this smearing effect, this ghosting is what we call it. And it is more noticeable when you're generating a smeared frame or a paused frame, if that makes any sense. So if the game stutters, fluid motion frames will generate a frame and you'll basically have this kind of blurry, smeary couple of frames. And I would say it looks worse than actually just the lower frame rate in some ways. That would be up to you to decide. But because Star Citizen doesn't start with a smooth frame rate, when you're generating these extra frames, those frames are sometimes compromised, like these ones you can see. This clip here, I've slowed right down, and you'll see the smearing or the ghosting in effect. As you rise up out of the hangar, the building is a bit of a mess, really. And that is somewhat kind of inherent with this sort of technology. DLSS can suffer from this as well, although it's getting better. As you're moving through the frames, especially at these lower frame rates where you've got less frames to generate, it can all get a little bit messed up and look a bit like this. Once you're out of the cities, though, on the minimum spec system, it's pretty effective. In Quantum Travel, you just get a nice boost, and I did a little combat mission here, just a combat assistance mission, and it looks good. You can't see that this is running at 100 frames, but when I'm playing it on a 144 Hertz monitor, I can see, and it looks good. But crucially, it doesn't feel like it's running at 100. So if this is running at 50 frames natively, but then you obviously add these extra frames in to get to 100, it still feels like it's running at 50. And obviously that applies at lower frame. Again, you get this weird thing where it looks pretty smooth, but it doesn't feel as smooth as it looks, and it's kind of a bit jarring. I guess some of this will depend on how used to gaming at high refresh rates you are. If you're quite used to that, I think this feels a bit weird. But if you're in Star Citizen, none of us really are playing at high refresh rates, so in some ways maybe it doesn't matter. Next, we pop the 7600 in with my main system. So this has now got a 7800 X3D, and really the GPU is the bottleneck everywhere now. So we've switched scenarios around, and you'll see again it is an improvement in performance. The GPU has been uplifted almost to looking like a much better performing GPU, and it is good. But again, in the cities, you get these moments of ghosting, you get these smeary bits, and it doesn't feel great. For some real fun, we've taken this system out into space to do a combat assistance mission, and you'll see huge frame rates. We're seeing massive 250 odd. This is crazy. Now, the input lag issue isn't so bad here because your original frame rate is quite high anyway, so the input lag doesn't feel so bad. So this just looks smooth and feels relatively smooth. So I think probably where I would end up leaning with this technology is that you probably want this on really high-end systems rather than really low-end systems. But again, there is an issue that we'll come back to in a moment. But I then took this onto a planet, and again, it feels good. We're helping the GPU out massively here because the GPU is the issue on the planet. And I even flew around with a dragonfly and crashed into a rock, and you know, it felt good. It looked good. It felt smooth. So all round on the higher end system, this is close to being something that I would recommend. But let's talk about the biggest issue with this. As we've talked about all the way through, input lag is an issue, and the frame gen lag that you're seeing there, I'm not sure whether that's added on top of what you already have, or I assume it is, otherwise it wouldn't be reported like that. But I took this into on the main system, I took this into Arena Commander, and I had this on, frame rates were high, and my performance, not the game's performance, my performance in the game was terrible. I couldn't get a kill, I was really struggling, and I was like, is this really down to the input lag? And I think actually once I turned fluid motion frames off and then played a bit more, I think it was the frame generation lag. So I turned it off, turned the whole motion frame stuff off, and my performance, it was just much easier to kill people. I found it much easier to react, and I didn't feel like I was kind of playing in mud almost. So I think from a competitive point of view, and Star Citizen isn't necessarily a competitive game from an FPS point of view, but I guess there are points, and some people do play it like that. I don't think you want this on, because I think the lag or the input, just the general input lag that is then the system, the mouse, the monitor, all of it, you're adding, it seems, quite a lot on top of it here. And so I don't think it's going to be recommended for anybody who's want to do any kind of fast twitch shooting or anything like that. I just don't think this is going to be, in its current state at least, what you want to use. The crucial thing is that this doesn't magically fix Star Citizen performance for especially low-end systems. It doesn't work as well on low-end systems, which I think AMD would recommend that you play on a higher-end system anyway, or your baseline frame rate should be higher anyway, maybe around the 60 FPS mark. But this isn't a magic fix for Star Citizen, and it is flawed in its current state.